Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell. Yo, mic check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Mic check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Mic check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Hopefully, you're able to hear me here on this thing here, and we should be back. What's going on? What's good? What's happening, everybody? We are here for the August 24th, 2025 edition of the Boxing Source Podcast. That's right, J.R. Bell here in the building with you live, and we're trying to, get a few things here, checking a few things out, making sure, we talk about a few things here on this particular edition of the Boxing Source Podcast. So, hopefully you're able to enjoy this particular edition of the podcast here. We got a couple of things that we're going to be going over when it comes to big stories in the sport of boxing, right? And we're also going to touch on one key fight that happened over the weekend in Orlando, Florida, as you had the interim WBA super welterweight title on the line there in the most valuable promotions card. So we're going to be touching on that here as well. But, with the two major topics that we have, we're going to be going over those two things here. So, I wanted to, get into more of that here. So, first off, of the whole news that was dropped down in reference to an exhibition bout between Jake Paul and Gervonta Tank Davis that is scheduled for Friday, November 14th at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, you got, of course, Jake Paul there that's competing around that cruiserweight division, had his fight against Little Chavez, as I say, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. There earlier, this year. And also with Tank Davis having this bout against Lamont Rose Jr. on March 1st at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, right? So you have these two fighters, I guess you could say, polarizing in the game of boxing. Of course, with Jake Paul, being in the game for, just a little bit, what I'd say about 10, 11 fights or something like that. I mean, it ain't really that many fights that Jake Paul has had in this particular professional career. And, all of these people saying, oh, he hasn't been fighting real fighters. And, he had this whole little thing with Mike Tyson. And, folks say that was like a real fight, but it actually counted as a fight, even though it shouldn't have. But hey, it was in Texas. They're under the Texas State Athletic Commission. So sometimes in Texas, they will pretty much allow just about anything, unless if you're smoking marijuana. But that's the whole nother story there on that front, right? So you had Jake Paul. It's pretty much going to be a year, almost a year to the day from when Jake Paul fought Mike Tyson at AT&T Stadium, that he's going to be having this fight against Gervonta Tank Davis in an exhibition match. Now, of course, with the whole thing with Mike Tyson, right, given that it was the baddest man on the planet, listen, my style is perpetuous, my power is impregnable, all that type of stuff there with Mike Tyson. That made that particular event one of the, biggest events out there in not just boxing, but in sports. Okay. So, with that being said, that is, kind of like part of why you have this actually coming to fruition. One, and then two, it was basically in the works since March 1st. But people, I guess, the people behind the scenes didn't necessarily expect the thing there with Tank Davis and Lamont Rose Jr. to happen the way it happened. All right. So, with that being said, now you have this whole little thing here where it's more about, okay, have this rematch here with Lamont Rose Jr. or, have this go forward with the bout with Jake Paul. And well, guess was a fairly easy decision of sorts there when it came to Tank Davis, I guess. But, the thing about it is, it's all about the money. Y'all know it's all about the money. Okay. So, some people thought that we would have had a rematch between Tank Davis and Lamont Rose Jr. You had like the bout there that was slated for some people thought it would be August 16th, right? But, as I said, I've been out there, over by No Excuse and talked with Lamont Rose Sr. a multitude of times there, over the past few months. and when they didn't necessarily, give an update as far as like what would happen between Lamont Rose Jr. and Tank Davis, then hey, you kind of like had that feeling that maybe that rematch wasn't going to be next. And I did say at one point, I said because the fight resulted in a draw and not like an outright win or a win for Lamont Rose Jr., right? That you didn't really have people to be obligated to an immediate rematch. Okay. You had like a result there, like in the past with Mayweather and Maidana. Mayweather had that win, but he ended up having an immediate rematch. While on the flip side, you could, go back to, like, say, for example, Manny Pacquiao versus Juan Manuel Marquez, the very first bout, that ended up in a draw. They didn't have an immediate rematch for that. Some other fights, like I said, you had like, Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury, one, that was a draw. They didn't have an immediate rematch for that. So you have multiple examples or, multiple instances where in the first bout, the bout resulted in a draw and it didn't end up in an immediate rematch. So this is, pretty much what they have here. And, two, on the flip side, like I was talking about when it came to Tank Davis, right? Now, everyone knows about, Tank Davis and his deal with Amazon Prime. But we only had 2 fights under that deal. First fight, Frank Martin. Second fight, Lamont Rose Jr. And with that being said, the second fight, right? Remember, with that bout against Lamont Rose Jr., that was originally slated to be around like November of last year, but it didn't necessarily happen. Then it got pushed back, and it got pushed back again, and it got pushed back again, and then we ended up just having it on March 1st. And now, as you see what's been, what happened over the past few months when it came to seeing if there was going to be a rematch, well, there you go, right? But I think with, those 2 bouts there, Frank Martin and Lamont Rose Jr., that it wasn't necessarily something there where you could have had a thing with Tank Davis, having a significant bound or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? So here in this case, we're seeing like, okay, we put it out there. Tank Davis versus Jake Paul. Look at what we've had. Look at the reaction that we've had when it comes to that. You know what I'm saying? Look at the reaction that we've had so far when it comes to Jake Paul versus Tank Davis, right? Listen, I've been getting calls about it, all that type of stuff. You know what I mean? When it came to this particular event, I've seen people, bring it up in topic of conversations when they don't really, be talking about boxing like that. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, if you had the thing there with the rematch with Lamont Rose Jr., yeah, you were going to get some buzz about it. But would you get the amount of buzz that would happen if it would be Tank Davis versus Jake Paul? Not on a large scale. No, just being honest, not on a large scale. Even with it being an exhibition, not on a large scale. So now it's more about, okay, you got these events that are happening on Netflix. Of course, we got what's coming up for September 13th. The undisputed super middleweight championship fight between Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. Now we got another event coming up for Friday, November 14th at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia, downtown Atlanta, with Tank Davis versus Jake Paul. Now, you've had, of course, Tank Davis have a couple of fights out there at the State Farm Arena before. And I've been out to, both of those. You know what I mean? You had the bout there against Yuriorkis Gamboa, right? And then you had the bout against Mario Barrios. I've been to both of those. But the Gamboa fight in 2019, that was a key bout there in reference to Tank Davis's career, because at that particular point, you've seen the amount of commercial success there with that particular bout and the box office success there with Tank Davis. And at that point, that was when the decision was made to have Tank Davis be on a pay-per-view platform after that. So after that bout that he had against Yuriorkis Gamboa, You've seen him there against Leo Santa Cruz, against Mario Barrios, against Isaac Cruz, Rolly Romero, that type of stuff there on pay-per-view. So once you've seen that happen with Tank Davis, that made him, on that next echelon of, as they say, superstar fighters. You know what I mean? So you got that on one side. And then on the other side, you got Jake Paul that's, come up, been a fighter of sorts or whatever it is that's kind of took into boxing, of course, had the very large social media following before basically getting into the pro fighting game. Okay. And with him, having his bouts in 2020, there when it came to the fight against Ali Gibb, and of course the memorable moment, as they say there, with him against Nate Robinson, right? That kind of catapulted him up as far as like popularity is concerned. And then of course you had the knockout win against Tyra Woodley in Tampa, Florida in 2021. So that kind of like boosted his popularity up even more. So the interest started to grow and to grow and to grow and to grow. And then when they had the fight that was scheduled against Mike Tyson last year, originally scheduled for July of last year, that kind of like put Jake Paul in a different light, so to speak, when it came to that. You know what I mean? So now you have him being in the mix against the one of the most popular active fighters in the game in Tank Davis. Okay. Now remember, Jake Paul had a little interest of sorts in fighting Santos Alvarez Barragan. Okay. But once you had the whole thing happen with Canelo and Crawford, I guess that is where you had Jake Paul have another direction or another route as to what big event he would put up for this year. Okay. Now I know that he had his little bout there, as I mentioned, against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. there in June over in Anaheim, right? And was a pretty okay bout, I would say. Not any real action where people got seriously hurt or whatever it is, nothing like that. Nah, but it was still headed to where Jake Paul had a unanimous decision win, and then we all saw what happened with Chavez Jr. soon after the fight. Oh my! I feel like that is one of the craziest stories in recent boxing memory. There, when it came to the aftermath of Jake Paul versus Julio Cesar Chavez. Okay, but now you're gonna have this here with these two fighters, Jake Paul and Tank Davis, and this could pretty much like say, hey, you know what, man, we could have something like this where, oh man, could this be for the mythical title of the face of boxing? Yeah, so is this fight between Jake Paul and Tank Davis for the title of the face of boxing. Okay. Now, Jake Paul is kind of like, teased at this, and we had like a little bit of a little promo. Jake Paul put out a promo in social media. They're talking about, him choosing Tank Davis, and you had like, someone like what is it? Like looking like he's Conor McGregor or like a KSI or something like that, and this is, what we ended up having happened, I would say, right? Um, and it's crazy that you would have someone like a Jake Paul, who, as I said, had his, as what it would say, pro debut in 2020. Now here we are 5 years later from that pro debut, over 5 years later or something like that, right? And he's been in the discussion to having potential fights against Canelo Alvarez, against Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, who was on that card on June 28th in Anaheim, right? Even like after, the bout that happened between Alexander Usyk and Daniel Dubois in London. He was out there in London and he had a face to face with Alexander Usyk. So it's crazy that you have someone like a Jake Paul that's been in the game 5 years. It's only had the amount of fights that he's had here so far, just 13 professional fights, and he's in the mix or in the discussions here with guys like Alexander Usyk, who is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. But I mean, you got your guy, your whole thing there with Zurdo Ramirez, who was a unified champion in cruiserweight. But having someone like Jake Paul step in the ring after Alexander Usyk just absolutely demolished Daniel Dubois for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world, that's like absolutely crazy, absolutely insane, whatever. You know what I mean? And with that being said, right, with Jake Paul now having this particular bout against Tank Davis, yeah, you got some people that are like, oh my God, why in the world is this happening? You got Jake Paul, who, to this day, some people still don't feel like Jake Paul is taking this boxing thing serious. So you got him on one side. And then you got Tank Davis on the other side, who is standing as the WBA lightweight champion. Okay. And a number of fight fans have been clamoring for Tank Davis to have as they say, a career defining bout of sorts against who they would kind of like view as his rival. Would it be like against a Devin Haney? Would it be like against a Teofimo Lopez or something like that? Would it be against a guy like a Shakur Stevenson, who was there as a WBC lightweight champion? And given the timing of what's been going on over the past couple of months, this is a time for the bout between Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson don't have to worry about a mandatory defense. He's honored that mandatory defense with this win over William Zepeda over in Queens, New York. So you could have this bout between Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson, but yet that isn't what's going on. That isn't what's happening next. Okay. What you have is something that could potentially be more lucrative than a fight between Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson, more lucrative than a fight between Tank Davis and Lamont Rose Jr. Okay, so this is the thing about sometimes about professional boxing and professional sports, right? When it comes to this, because money talks, money rules over everything in a sense, and in many senses, I would say. And here you had that proposal of Tank Davis versus Lamont Rose Jr., Tank Davis versus Shakur Stevenson, or Tank Davis versus Jake Paul. Well, you see what the choice is, or what ended up being the choice. Once again, the number of people are disappointed in this, and hey, I can see why. I can see why. And we're what about still like 3 months away, 3 months away from this, and like I was mentioning, people have been talking about it. I've been getting phone calls about it. I've already got phone calls about people trying to make a trip out there, going out to Atlanta, looking for hotels in Atlanta, over by downtown, or in the as they say, what, a beltway or the loop there when it comes to what, 285, Interstate 285 or whatever, or staying by the airport or by, what is it, like College Park or something. I mean, like I'm getting talks about that already. You know what I mean? And when you have something like that, that is a, what I would say, a moment that kind of like, as they say, goes beyond boxing. What do I mean by that? Yeah, you got your whole thing with your hardcore fans or whatever it is or whatnot. You know what I mean? That kind of like, watch boxing regardless of the event or whatever it is, or if it feels like it's a significant event within boxing, then they'll tune in. But if it's something where people that are here to see an event or here to see like, oh, this is like a huge event, they kind of like would know these guys, they would have an idea of who they are, then yeah, they'll be able to tune in. Okay. And this is what we get here with this one. Like the fight between Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia kind of like went outside the scope of professional boxing. That's why the pay-per-view numbers for that particular fight were as successful as they were. Compare that to maybe the numbers there between a Tank Davis versus a Frank Martin, which for me is a fight that I wanted to see at that point because I wanted to be interested to see what Tank Davis does against a guy like a Frank Martin. But if it's something that people that don't really watch boxing like that, they ain't necessarily going to be interested in that because yeah, they may know Tank Davis, but they ain't really going to know Frank Martin that much to kind of like be like, okay, is Frank Martin going to be somebody that would be a viable threat to a Tank Davis or would make for a good fight? So if you have something like that, you have something like a Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach, if you're not in the DMV area, you wouldn't know about the backstory between those two fighters. So that isn't going to pique your interest like that. But Jake Paul, Tank Davis, they're like, maybe that could be interesting. This is not much different than when you had the whole thing there years ago when you had Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. This is pretty much like that whole thing. Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor. That's pretty much what you got here in this bout between Jake Paul and Tank Davis. You know what I mean? And with that being said, right? The other thing too, with it being an exhibition, right? A number of people have kind of like complained, oh my God, oh, this is an exhibition, oh, this means nothing, oh, why are they doing this or whatever. When this is boxing. Boxing has had exhibitions over the course of history. All right. We ain't talking about like a Mike Tyson versus a Roy Jones Jr. or Manny Pacquiao versus an Alpo dude or whatever, or Floyd Mayweather having this fight against Logan Paul and a few other guys out there, or like who was my dude that he ended up fighting that is kind of like doing this thing in 122 or whatever, right? Like we've had a multitude of bouts there that have been exhibitions that have involved highly popular fighters over the course of history. We've had Muhammad Ali in a couple of the exhibition bouts. Not just the one there, what he had against Antonio Inoki, right? But he had one against Lyle Alzado, right? In the past, he's had that happen. You had George Foreman against 5 different fighters. Okay, you've had that happen, right? And even before all of that, you had Jack Dempsey involved in exhibitions. You've had Jack Johnson involved in exhibitions. You've had John L. Sullivan involved in exhibitions. You've had a multitude of other pro boxers that have been involved in exhibition fights, right? But here I guess it's what they say, recency bias or knee jerk reactions or that type of stuff. That's why you kind of get the backlash that you're currently getting with this announcement of Jake Paul versus Tank Davis, right? Real quick here, shout out to Jaime Alvarado there in the live chat. Oh, he's saying he would like to see Jake Paul versus Andy Ruiz. A real challenge for once for Jake Paul. Oh man, listen, if I fought Jake Paul, I'd be very thankful for the opportunity. I'd be blessed. Man, I need to get back in the ring. I feel like I got robbed. They call our draw against Jarrell Miller. I should have got the win. All that type of stuff there with Andy Ruiz. We haven't seen him in the ring since then. It's been, over 12 months since that bout between Andy Ruiz Jr. and Jarrell Miller over at BMO Stadium in Los Angeles. Of course, part of that Terrence Crawford versus Israel Madrimov fight card there that they had. But Jake Paul versus Andy Ruiz Jr., maybe. But remember, after Jake Paul had his fight against Lil Chavez, there was a little bit of buzz about Jake Paul potentially fighting, Gilberto Zerdo Ramirez. They even brought it up in a press conference that they had, there sometime back before you had that fight card, where Zerdo fought Junior Dorticos, of course, the KO doctor, and with Jake Paul having his headlining bout there against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. But Jake Paul versus Andy Ruiz, maybe he could have something like that. You know what I mean? I don't know. But like I said, I mean, you've had a multitude of exhibition bouts over the course of history in the sport of boxing. This is no different. The thing about it is, in this current day here in the sport of boxing, right? We talk about it in the lower levels of the sport with guys that are just starting out, pro debut, 3-0, 2-1, or whatever it is, that they're featuring these guys and they're putting them on TV when they should be like off TV, right? This is kind of like what I would say, the oversaturation of the sport of boxing, not just in the lower levels, but at the higher levels as well. Why? Because now it's more that people are expecting a lot more out of these fighters when they're world champions or top contenders or whatever it is, when you didn't really have this much criticism back in the day. Kind of like brought it up in previous videos and things like that when I say, listen, when you have these supposed tune-ups, right? That's happened all the time in boxing, all the time. The greatest fighters in history have had those type of fights. They didn't go after top challenger against top challenger all the time, back to back to back. They've had those instances where they had to, do something to stay busy. Not exhibitions. I ain't even talking about exhibitions. I'm talking about real professional fights where they've been going up against these guys, and it's like, yeah, you don't necessarily go up against a top fighter every single time. Okay. Now, of course, one of the more legendary fighters in the game, of course, I talked about, his kid there, in Julio Cesar Chavez. He had what? Over 110 professional fights in his career. Yeah, it spanned 25 years, but he's had over 110 or so fights, right? But even at his point, where I could go back to where he fought in, what is it? I'm going to the box rec, and I got this thing here for December 13th, 1991. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. faced Ignacio Perdomo, and Ignacio Perdomo had a record of 7-2. Okay, let me run that by you again. Julio Cesar Chavez had a sanctioned bout in the welterweight division on December 13th, 1991, when he was 77-0 against Ignacio Perdomo, who was 7-2. Yeah, it's Mexico, I know, but still, like, he had fights against guys in 1990. After his win over Meldrick Taylor, he fought Akwe Ado with a record of 5-3, and Russell Mosley with a record of 4-3-1. So it's happened all the time. You know what I'm saying? You feel me? Shout out to L-Dub Boxing in the building. What's going on with that? And hold up here. I got my guy Huey in the building. What's going on, Huey? He says here, how many world champs had exhibitions? This event is great to bring eyes to the sport, but Tank versus Jake is difficult to defend on its own. Now, I won't know if it's like, necessarily current world champions, but we've had, guys that, like I mentioned earlier, with a Jack Dempsey, with a Jack Johnson, with a John L. Sullivan. That was back in the early days of heavyweight pugilism or whatever it is. Those guys were at the top of the heavyweight division. All right. But they had exhibitions. Muhammad Ali. This guy, Muhammad Ali, is going up against Antonio Inoki. That was a bad voiceover Therefore, Howard Cosell, listen here. You got Muhammad Ali. He is the greatest of all time. He's going up in this exhibition bout against Antonio Inoki. Uh, and so you've had that. You had Muhammad Ali against Lal Alzado. You had, George Foreman. Yeah, he was, coming off that loss against Muhammad Ali or whatever it was, going up against, five fighters, in the same day, So you had that. You also had, world champs that had exhibitions. I'll give you a great example of a world champion that had an exhibition, and that's none other than Rocky Balboa versus Thunder Lips. There you go. That was an exhibition right there. Yeah, it said yeah. Julio Cesar Chavez fought a month after losing to Sweet Pea, Pernell Whitaker. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, that happened. So I mean, and I brought the whole thing there when it came to Chavez's fights that he had when he was 77-0, going up against guys that were like 5-2 or whatever. You know what I mean? So like this is what we're talking about here. Um, he had, what is it, what was the thing that he had after the draw there? Yeah, I said Mike Powell. He had a fight against Mike Powell. That's Julio Cesar Chavez. The next month after, he had the majority draw against Pernell Whitaker. And then 2 months later, he fought Andy Holligan over in Puebla in Mexico for the WBC super lightweight title. So, and then he had to fight the following month against Frankie Randall, lost by split decision, and then the following and he had an immediate rematch there with that, and then won by technical decision on that. So I mean that's like I said, that's happened over the course of history of boxing. So here with this thing with Jake Paul and Tank Davis is not much different. You know what I mean? But yeah, hey, and yeah, definitely, most definitely here with Joe Louis. He definitely did exhibition fights for the armies overseas during World War II. That was like one of the big stories, there during that time period that Joe Louis was doing that, there for the army. You know what I mean? Yeah. Here we go. He says, good point. Might not be current champs, but still, yeah, top fighters in the sport. Yeah, yep. So I mean, it's happened, all the time. It's just within fighters that are active right now, you haven't necessarily seen that. I think you had an attempt there with Ryan Garcia against, what was it, the Alpo dude that they tried to do, but it didn't quite work out. So you ended up having what, Emmanuel Dapidran Pacquiao against him, right? And then now you see what that led to: Manny Pacquiao versus Mario Barrios. And real quick, don't be surprised if in December of this year we get a rematch between Manny Pacquiao and Mario Barrios. If it ain't Manny Pacquiao versus Mario Barrios, I'm telling you, if they had Manny Pacquiao fighting Rolly Romero for Romero's WBA title, I'm going to be like, oh my God, how in the hell would you have Manny Pacquiao fighting for 2 world championships back to back after being out of the game for 4 years? That would be insane. That would be insane there. But yeah, back to this thing here with Jake and Tank, right? The other thing too is that with the amount of attention that both of these fighters get, the event there being on Netflix, so Netflix is definitely interested in pushing out an event. And with the amount of reach that Netflix has, I mean, I don't know what the current subscriber count is at this point. It might be around like 200 million or something like that. I don't know. Let's see. I might try to, get like the thing on that. You know what I mean? Because 300 million global subscribers. It says around like estimate of 301.6 million subscribers around the world. So you see how many viewers or potential viewers you could get off of that. I mean, I've talked about the numbers that Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson had overall, like around what 60 million plus or whatever it is, with the co-feature bout there, of course, that rematch between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, getting around 50 million viewers, live viewers, there for that. So they're seeing here, they're like, hey, look, we could potentially get, that amount of people to watch this particular event. Hey, that's great for us. You know what I mean? That's great for us on that point or on that front, right? Now also you have that potential possibility of having multiple fights that could be featured on that fight card as well, with the number of more viewers that could be looking at it. And my thing is with that, I kind of like have that for Jake Paul, is that Jake Paul, over the course of his professional career, once he brought up MVP with Nikita Bedarian, he has been able to have a number of these fighters that are featured on MVP have viewers there to watch them. You know what I mean? Jaime Alvarado asks, "Do you think Tank can really hurt Paul?" Um, yeah, I think he can. I think he can. You got to understand something. It's not just about the weight; it's about the technique. It's about the technique, speed, or whatever it is. I mean, it's like, regardless of the gloves, the size of gloves, or whatever it is, technique. It's just like actual fighting out in the streets. You seen smaller guys take down or knock out big dudes. Technique. You know what I'm saying? So, hey, I could say that it could happen. You know what I mean? But yeah, back on the thing there, what I said for potential viewership. Okay. Um, People talked about it last year when it came to Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, that you'll want to see if you could get yourself involved in this particular fight card. Now, the thing about it is that given the amount of the guarantees that would be out there for both Jake Paul and Tank Davis, what would that leave out there for other fighters that could potentially be involved in it? I would have to go back to, let me see if I could, go back to the poster there for this thing, because if I see that there's multitude, not just MVP, but a multitude of other entities involved in this, right? Then hey, we could potentially we could have something. You know what I mean? We could have something. But right now, they have it as MVP, most valuable promotion. So Netflix, in association with most valuable promotion, so to speak, is what's kind of like hitting this fight or this event over at State Farm Arena for Friday, November 14th. You know what I mean? Huey P here says that Jake gasses out and then Tate will be able to catch him with shots he isn't going to see. You could have something like that. Or it could be like, how the whole thing with Conor McGregor, there against Floyd Mayweather. Conor McGregor was like throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing. And Floyd Mayweather was like, yeah, listen, I'll just use a shoulder roll. Look like I'll get hit, but I'm gonna roll with the punch, and then once the gas is out, then I'm gonna just go into another gear. It don't even have to be a full gear. It could be a half gear. It could be a quarter gear, and I'm gonna knock him out. And that's what ended up happening. You know what I mean? So, hey, you can have that here go down with this, and given that it's an exhibition, if you have like a knockout or a stoppage, does it count on the official record? No. Will it still be posted all over social media? Hell yeah, it would. Okay, there you go. Timothy Taylor, man, shout out to Timothy Taylor here in the building. He says Jake Paul is going to have a problem connecting on Tank because he likely has never sparred with a fighter nearly a foot shorter than him. Hey, good. Hey, that's a good point. That could be a good point right there. I mean, you got Jake Paul there listed at 6'1", and with Tank Davis, he's listed at what, like 5'5". He's listed at like 5'5" or something like that. 5'5" and a half. Okay, so you can't necessarily have that many fighters out there unless if you're calling up guys that are around 126 maybe, or 122 or something like that. They say, how could you deal with the movement of a Tank Davis? You know what I mean? And the thing with Tank is like he'll have sudden movements where he could, back up, slide in, slide off to the side, and all that type of stuff. So it's not really about how Tank kind of like moves as far as like being flat footed or whatever, but he could have quick twitch movements, not just with his hands, but with his feet as well. So that's another thing there that you would kind of have to deal with in this sense. But here's another thing too with this fight overall, even with it being an exhibition. Once Most Valuable Promotions goes out there and makes the announcement of a press conference or whatever it is for this, we're going to see the amount of attention that this gets from the media inside the sport of boxing, outside the sport of boxing, all over. You're going to see the amount of attention that it's going to get once this first press conference happens with Jake Paul and Tank Davis. All right. Some people could probably see the numbers that are out there when it comes to the initial announcement or whatever. I don't know if I had to like freaking log into Instagram or whatever it is, but I'm gonna try to get on this thing here for Instagram, right? And you're gonna see like if you go to like either Most Valuable Promotions Instagram page, right? Or if you go into Jake Paul's Instagram page or Tank Davis's Instagram page or social media, then you'll see the amount of attention that they get for this thing here. You know what I mean? And it's like, for some, it's like crazy, crazy numbers. You feel me? So for them to, kind of like say, hey, you know what? Having this happen, yeah, this is a crazy, crazy event that's going to be happening in this sense. And I know that there's, like I said, I wish I was out there over in Orlando this weekend for the events that they had for MVP, and I'm going to talk about them here a little bit later. But I would really wanted to, get a chance to chat with Jake Paul in reference to, making this particular fight take place, because as I was mentioning here way early in the show, and I kind of like said this in Wednesday here before, like I had like a good number of technical difficulties and whatnot. But on March 1st, I didn't see this coming. I didn't. I was like out of it. Of course, I'd be like taking photos for a number of the events that I do have credentials for these boxing fight cards. And for the Tank versus Lamont Rose Jr., I'm like at a designated spot, so I don't necessarily move around that much or move around a lot. So one, I'm not like say for example, I'm not ringside. I'm not ringside. So with that being said, I'm not there where I could potentially see who is like ringside or whatever it is, unless they show it on the jumbotron. You know what I mean? So with that being said, right? I would say, hey, you know what? I didn't think that Jake Paul was there in the building, and I didn't even see it on the post-fight press conference. I was like, yeah, and I brought this up before, and I don't know, I'm gonna probably rehash the video clip since I was, there at the press conference and I recorded the whole thing live or whatever it is. And the thing was, the last question, I don't know if it was my guy KG there or if it was Ron that asked him about, him and having what his next fight would be as far as like, having a rematch or whatever it is. But remember Tank saying, hey, I would like for it to be next, but it's not going to be next. And then the folks, the press, they were like, whoa, what? Huh? It's not going to be next. We didn't really think that, they wouldn't go forward with an immediate rematch with Lamont Rose Jr. like that. But when Tank said that, it's like, huh? So if it's not going to be next, then who would it be against? And folks, of course, brought out the name while Shakur is like, nope, nah. So, but then when he said that person was in the locker room, I'm like, who in the world would it be? It wasn't even like Isaac Cruz. Like Isaac Cruz was probably the guy that people thought it would be, but no, it wasn't Isaac Cruz. It was Jake Paul. And I'm like, oh man, I ain't even see that happening. Shout out to Android. My guy Android here in here, man. Man, I gotta see if this thing, man. Oh, see, you know what? This thing here, I guess with the Rumble, it don't show it though, right? But he puts in this thing here for the 6.99. It says a boxing has always been built on stars. This is buzzing out of control already. It'll bring in money for the entire sport. Yeah, there you go. You know, I mean, you've had that happening, all, like I said, all over the course of history. You know what I'm saying? So I've brought out those multitude of examples of exhibition matches happening within the sport of boxing with notable fighters, whether they've been world champions, current champions, or whatever it is, from Jack Johnson to Muhammad Ali to George Foreman to Jack Dempsey to John L. Sullivan. You know what I mean? So there you go. You know what I mean? So yeah, this, as I mentioned, when I'm getting phone calls about people trying to look for hotels, they're in the city of Atlanta for that weekend, and yes, they are going to have a Atlanta Falcons home football game on that Sunday evening or that Sunday afternoon too. So good luck if you're trying to get out there to Atlanta for that weekend. All right. Shout out to Timothy Taylor here. Timothy Taylor here in the building on the live chat says when it comes to other fights that are coming up here, you got the following week, as I mentioned there, with Friday, November 14th. You got this here with Jake Paul versus Tank Davis, but then on November 22nd over in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, headlining bout, WBC light heavyweight championship fight, David Benavidez versus Anthony Yard. He brings up Anthony Yard, saying that Anthony Yard is out there in camp doing work, saying that he appears to be doing a lot of body shot training there for David Benavidez. Is it to attack David Benavidez's body, or is it too risky? Well, I think it would be. The thing with Benavidez, and we kind of seen it here in a number of his fights, he's been one of the more active offensive fighters in the game, right? And with Anthony Yard, okay, he's around the same, what I say, around probably the same height of sorts, maybe, but I would say that like Benavidez has just about a little bit taller than him. You know what I mean? But for Anthony Yard, my thing would be how we would be able to get to or get within range to land those body shots there against David Benavidez. And he would have to be, I would say he would have to be properly coached to be a good counterpuncher. Because if you're going to have, like, say, for example, look at what David Benavidez did against David Morrell Jr. there on February 1st in Las Vegas, right? Particularly in the middle rounds. You had, Morrell, he has this habit of having a high guard. If you're seeing me here live, whether it's YouTube or Rumble, you see me here live. This is like, David Morrell Jr. with a high guard. And this is pretty much like his position with the high guard, right? So if you're David Benavidez, or if you've been a number of opponents for David Morrell Jr., you know what I'm saying? Like Hot Rod, Radovic Kalajic, right? David Benavidez. Or, the recent bout that, Morrell had there against Imam Katayev. He's having this high guard, right? If you're within range of him, you got a lot of spots where you can hit him. Right here on the chin. Hook around the guard. Punch to the body, right? So David Benavidez kind of like picked that apart by going around with the hook, jabbing within the high guard, within this whole middle part, or as you see them chop down one hand, shoot with the other. David Benavidez could do the same thing there against Anthony Yard if Anthony Yard does not do, proper head movement or try to catch and slip and move. So with Anthony Yard trying to see if he could have a body attack against a David Benavidez here, he has to be really careful on that front. He does. He does on that instance, man. But I just gave like a little bit of a quick thing there for that particular fight. Like I said, the headlines the November 22nd card in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. You're gonna have a number of key fights there on that card, man. That's gonna be a good one. That's gonna be a very good fight card, so to speak. There, you're gonna have, of course, Benavidez versus Yard. You're gonna have Brian Norman Jr. versus Devin Haney. You're gonna have Arthur Beterbiev versus Dion Nicholson. I don't know why. You're gonna have Jesse Bam Rodriguez versus Fernando Martinez. They're unifying the WBC, WBO, and WBA Super Flyweight Championships. You're gonna have Abdullah Mason versus Sam Noakes for the vacant WBO lightweight title, and you're gonna have Subriel Matias versus Dalton Smith for the WBC Super Lightweight title. So you got that's what six fights there for November 22nd. That's probably the best card. Well, probably I say it is without question the best fight card that we've had in the sport this year and probably over the past few years, to say the least. Right. So you got all of that happening there for November. So 2 weeks of big events back to back with Jake Paul versus Tank Davis, and then this whole thing here headlining by David Benavidez versus Anthony Yarde. So we got to see how that goes there. All right, so that was what I had in reference to the whole thing there with Jake Paul versus Tank Davis. We're gonna get more as the days go on. Y'all know that the amount of coverage of that would be absolutely insane, absolutely crazy. And here's the other thing too. Before I go into this next topic, because it's kind of like relates to what's coming up. It's crazy, at least in a sense to me, how this particular announcement with Jake Paul versus Tank Davis, at least for me, has been getting more buzz or has gotten a bigger reaction within the sport, not outside the sport, but within the sport, to me, than Canelo versus Crawford for the undisputed super middleweight championships. But that could be for a number of reasons. I might get into that here a little bit later. Okay. But with that being said, you got this event for Allegiant Stadium, September 13th, the undisputed super middleweight championships. Santos Saul Alvarez Barragan versus Terrence Allen Crawford. Okay. And the thing that kind of like has really gotten a few people, a few fight fans a little bit upset. Either a little bit upset or they kind of like reacted a certain way. Is that we had news released out there that Canelo Alvarez had a little bit of a workout session with a notable fighter in boxing. I'm gonna just put it up. I don't care, man. It was disclosed that Canelo Alvarez was in camp with Jaron Boots Ennis to prepare for his upcoming bout against Terrence Crawford. What to make of it? Oh man, I'll tell you, bro. Uh, listen, of course, I communicate with um media member that has been there within the camp or around the camp for Jerron Boots Ennis for a long time now, and that is Brother Jamil Parker of YSM Sports Media. And he made as they say, a cryptic post of sorts some time back. And I initially like hit him up about it, and I thought it was about something in reference to Boots Ennis involving a fight. Well, he said no. And then after he said no, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just brush it off. Then I see this whole thing with Canelo and Boots together in the ring. And I'm like, oh, so that's what it was. Oh, okay. All right. I'm like, okay. All right. Oh, you motherfuckers. Okay. All right. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. But I'm like, well, if you're Canelo Alvarez, if you're preparing for a fighter like a Terrence Crawford, you'll want to have someone that has the ability to move in and out of the pocket, potentially throw counter punches, or throw punches around the jab that you would be throwing, be able to be switch hitter whether they're southpaw or orthodox, and would have around the same kind of like attributes of sorts, or the same thing when it comes to like a television tape. So, Boots Ennis. All right, bet. Now, I've kind of heard a couple of other things there when it came to Boots going out there, but yeah, that that was like something that like really had me surprising. Yeah, it's yeah, man, yeah, trying to get to like 3K, trying to get 3K here. Appreciate all the support here for the Boxing Swords on YouTube. Yeah, all the visitors out here, just hit the subscribe button. Doesn't cost anything to hit the subscribe button. You know what I'm saying, or anything like that. Oh, wait, hold up. Let me see if I can get this here. All right, here we go. Did Canelo ask Boots to join him in camp, or did Boots ask Canelo could he join his camp? uh, the word is it was option B. I'm gonna just say the word is it was option B. That's all. Oh man, my guy smack like that in the building, man. Says what's good, man. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've heard. I mean, the word is it could have been option B. I mean, I don't know, man. But hey, listen. Like I said, man, when you go with the tail of the tape, when you got Jaron Ennis, as I said, there that is a orthodox, but also switch to southpaw. He's there, listed at 5'10", okay, with a reach listed at 74. So if you're gonna have somebody there that is taller, he's what he's taller than Terrence Crawford, right? He has, the same around the same reach as Terrence Crawford. So, hey, and he's there as what, like 10 years younger or whatever it is, or whatnot. I don't know. Man, I forgot he's like 37 or whatever. But yeah, it's like say option B is not good. Hey, I don't know, man, but it is what it is, man. That's it's something there where hey, if you felt like he wanted to, have that thing happen. Now, I don't know. Maybe you have the same, maybe Timothy Taylor, you have the same views of sorts of Mr. Greg Hackett, Mr. GHB himself. He said he wasn't quite, a fan of it. He didn't really like, having Boots out there working against, working with Canelo Alvarez or whatever it is. But hey, this is something like I say, sometimes things like this happen over the course of boxing too. Like you have two highly skilled fighters there that go into camp and work out. It's happened in the past, like the days of Pernell Whitaker. You had Pernell Whitaker working with with Floyd Mayweather or something like that. You know what I mean? You had I don't know, like recently, what I would say, what Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. While Tyson Fury was preparing for Deontay Wilder, you know, Julio Cesar Chavez probably went up against or went up in there with a number of top fighters, in the game. So I think a number of these highly skilled people, if they want to get the most out of themselves in preparation for a bout of a magnitude like Canelo versus Crawford, then you got to see if you're able to get the best available. You know what I mean? And sometimes, that could be really difficult depending on the cost or whatever it is. Because a lot of times these fighters spend resources in order to bring sparring partners in. They got to spend that money in order to get themselves prepared for a bout. Whether the purse is lucrative or it isn't. If they want to get the best that they can, they do it within their budget. So I guess here that's what you had in a sense. So I mean that's kind of like what I got off of that. It says either way, I think it's good for all parties involved. I mean, as I was mentioning there with Canelo Alvarez, he gets a fighter there that is, like I said, at 5'10", with the same reach listed as Terrence Crawford, able to switch hit, and has like he can have quick twitch movements of sorts. You know what I mean? And y'all seen the speed of sorts there with Boots Ennis too. So there you go. You know what I mean? I mean, it's different than having what is it, Darrell Blasval Saint, who was initially in camp there with Canelo Alvarez. But now having someone like Boots there, yeah, you kind of get like a whole different look. Says Crawford and Boots have the same fan base outside their home states. You might have to be conscious of what might cause you to lose boxing fit. According to some, they say that they don't have the same fan base. Well, I mean, it's outside. I'm talking about outside the home state. Nah, if you rocking with Bud Crawford, sometimes you don't rock with Boots Ennis because some people thought, at the time when Boots Ennis was, coming up there in the welterweight division, being a what is it, the IBF mandatory challenger at one point there at welterweight, that he could have been a opponent there for Terrence Crawford after Crawford defeated Errol Spence for the undisputed welterweight championships. But given that Crawford had this decision, he wanted to have the rematch first initially with Errol Spence Jr. one, and then two, he wanted to have that particular bout, I guess, in the higher weight. So that kind of like nixed that fight from happening there in the previous year. You know what I'm saying, or at least around like 2023 or early 2024, right? So now, fast forward, you still have, people within the boxing circles. If you've been around like YouTube or, the Discord or whatever it is, they still talk about, Boots and Crawford and all that type of stuff, right? But internally, they have a lot in common. Like internally, they have a lot in common as far as like their upbringing, their amount of talent, um, the business part of the game, kind of like the same thing, you know. So with that being said, right, the fan bases for Boots and the fan base for Bud is kind of like different. A shout yeah, spec like that says, yeah, hit the like button. You know what I'm saying? Hit the like button. Show support there. Don't cost anything. Hit the thumbs up on the live. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, shout out to you on that. But yeah, I mean, this is really interesting little situation. I think Boots is slated to be out there in the camp with Canelo for a good little bit, but we'll see. Yes, Boots does have a scheduled bout for October, right? Where he's going up against Luis Malima at the Wells Fargo Center, right? So he's going to be preparing for that. And that is, a WBA final eliminator of sorts, right? So with that being a WBA final eliminator, um, he is, likely with the win, going to be right next in line to fight for the WBA super welterweight title. Now, speaking of that, as far as like the WBA and their rankings there at super welterweight, we had a key bout that happened in the super welterweight division over in Orlando, Caribe Royale Resort in Orlando, Florida. Right? You had Ennis against Abbas Barao, with Ennis being at the time going in there undefeated and the interim WBA champion, going up against Abbas Barao, who was ranked at number 1 in the WBA. That fight went 12 rounds, and Abbas Barao ended up having the win to become the new interim champion. Okay. Unanimous decision win, one score of 117-112, 117-110, excuse me. Another score of 115-112, and one score of 116-111. And you had Ennis down at the end of round 12. And I'm telling you, man, that was a really good bout. That was a really good bout, though. I'm gonna say that. I ain't really expect much from it, but it was a really good bout, especially from like round 3 on over. It was a really good bout. But shout out to Abbas Barao. He really executed really well over the course of this fight, right? And you've seen it there that he kind of like took advantage of a number of the flaws that Ennis had. There wasn't a lot of pop behind a number of punches that Ennis had early in the fight. I know it was mentioned, back in the back half of the fight, by the the commentary there. but you really didn't see that much oomph behind the punches there for Eugenio Tejas. But for Basparao, it was like kind of sharp, short, compact, right to the point. So once he got to the inside within range, especially up close, he was able to be short and just, not like be wild with it, not overreach or anything like that. He was just there and boom, like uppercuts, just shifty with it. And he was shifty with the movements too that Joanna Sayers wasn't able to quite deal with. He wasn't. And then in the last round, man, it was a good 12th round, boy. You had, good combinations there from Joanna Sayers, but the more talent combinations came there from Abbas Barao. And then he got that last flurry in within 10 seconds left in the round and had Joanna Sayers down on the canvas there. It was like, oh, man, it was crazy. You know what I'm saying? So, with that being said, Abbas Barao gets the decision win. He is now the new WBA interim champion. Okay, they're at 154 pounds. So what does this mean for the division? Oh man, it's a lot, man. It's a lot. Because as I said, we had like instances there with Joanna Tejas. He had his last bout over on March 1st, Barclays Center, against Julian J. Rock Williams, who was, of course, a former world champion there at 154. And there were a couple of times there with Joannis Tejas over his previous bouts that he looked impressive, there in his victories. The most notable to me was his TKO win over Johan Gonzalez last year. Okay. But, that being said, even when I was there live in this bout against Julian Williams at the Barclays Center, there were times where he may have had J. Rock Williams in trouble, but he didn't necessarily, finish the bout. So he didn't necessarily have that element of, okay, I could end this fight like right here, right now. And with that being said, I'm like, well, he's there around the top, and he only had 10 pro fights at that point, after getting that win against J. Rock Williams. So he's there around the top of the WBA rankings, but he hasn't really had that many fights yet. Yeah, he's had his wins over, as I mentioned there, J. Rock Williams, Johan Gonzalez, Joseph Jackson, Sergio Garcia. He had that TKO win against Sergio Garcia, but he doesn't necessarily have enough, activity of sorts there to kind of say, hey, he's ready to really take on the guys that are at the top of 154 pounds. And here with the Bas Barao, Barao is there, came in there with a record of 16-1, a European champion of sorts there, right? But no one, kind of seen or expected much from this guy coming into this bout. But I would say, given that he had 16, 17 pro bouts there, but having the, the level that, the skill level that he had in there against Joannis Tejas, it was something that Joannis Tejas wasn't necessarily ready for on one side, right? And then on the other side too, and this was kind of notable in a sense going into this, was that this was Joannis Tejas' first bout without having Ronnie Shields in the corner full time. Ronnie Shields was at another location there, of course, there with Justin Paldo in San Antonio, Texas. But still, not having Joannis Tejas in the camp over at Houston, his first bout that was, outside of that camp. Who knows? You know what I mean? But this one, you kind of seen a number of flaws there with Joannis Tejas. And hey, shout out to Abbas Barao. He was able to get this win. He kind of outpointed Joannis Tejas over a number of these rounds, especially at the end of the rounds there, starting from round 4. Because from round 4 on, you had some of them rounds were really close or pretty close, and then Barao was able to close the show within a minute left or 15 to 10 seconds left outside of that 12th round, of course, right? But he was able to close the show. The only time that he kind of didn't really do that was round 10 or round 11 or something, where Tejas had a good showing, but Burrell had like key uppercuts there, starting from the fourth round, but it started to really affect Joannes Tejas of there in the eighth round too. So I'd say he was really poised there in this bout against Joannes Tejas because Tejas had been there in the Caribe Royale a few times before. He's been part of what is it the I think it was like some of them have been like MVP type cards or whatever it is, or he's been what was it like? You had a PBC card when he fought Johan Gonzalez. That was a PBC card there at Caribe Royale. But he's had. I'm going to BoxRec right now. He's had one, two, three, four, five, six. This was his sixth bout at that particular venue. So I mean, Tejas has been very used to being there at Caribe Royale. I mean, he's had the majority of his fights there, But here against Abbas Barao, I guess it was something where he just didn't. He wasn't able to properly deal with that type of fighting style. And I think he did also have that whole thing with the high guard too. I think it's a lot. I think you see it there with a number of Cuban fighters, at least some here within this recent class, is that they had that whole thing with the high guard, and you got that uppercut, and that's what Abbas Barao was doing over the multitude or the majority of this fight. He was landing well with the right uppercut, and also caught like Tejas there with the left hook too, because at times you see Joannes Tejas have that right hand down, especially like coming off of being in close quarters or like trying to back up too. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, Smack says, I love fights where you don't expect a lot and it exceeds expectations. I'll give you an example. When you had Alberto Puello versus Sandro Martin on that Barclays the card March 1st, I didn't expect much from that fight at all, man. But it ended up being a pretty good action fight. And so here you had the same thing happen with Joannes Tejas in the Bass Barao. So that was kind of good. Let me go back here with the previous comment here from Timothy Taylor. He says, if Canelo beats Crawford and says in the post-fight presser that he couldn't have beat Crawford without the help of Boots Ennis, Boots will lose lots of his. I don't know. Maybe it'll happen. I don't know. Hey, listen. For some reason, right now, I don't know if they're fans of Boots or not, but there's some people that are against Boots Ennis right now, saying he's a turncoat. He's a turncoat for working with Canelo. I'm like, come on, what are we doing here? We can't even have like elite fighters working with elite fighters no more. Like, what's going on here, man? Like, it's absolutely crazy. You feel me? But it says back like that says, I don't know if Canelo would say that. I don't think he would say that either, man. I don't think he would say that either. Oh goodness, but yeah, man. You know, like I said, that particular fight between Joannes Tejas and the Barao, that was a really good scrap that happened there yesterday at the Caribe Royale Resort in Orlando. You had also Lucas Badi versus Roger Gutierrez there with Lucas Badi getting a unanimous decision win there in that bout. And some people like had the little story there with Lucas Badi being signed with Most Valuable Promotions, and that coming off of his knockout win last year against Ashton Silva, and with Ashton Silva not being part of Most Valuable Promotions, where some people thought that we would have got a rematch between those two, because shoot, like Ashton Silva was winning like every single round before getting hit with a two-piece in the biscuit. So if you're gonna have, Ashton Silva like outboxing this dude, outpointing this dude, almost being in route to an easy victory, right? But then gets caught with a two piece. You mean to tell me that you can't, necessarily get a rematch off of that? Oh well, I guess not. It is what it is. But hey, with Lucas Bade here getting a win over Roger Gutierrez, I guess he'll get in the mix there a little bit with the lightweight division. I had to pull up the rankings out there, for the lightweight division and see where Lucas Bade stands there within lightweight. Maybe he's out there within the WBA rankings or whatever. But I have to. I'm checking here right now, and let me see. Lucas Body is currently ranked number 15 in the WBC, according to their latest rankings there. But I see him there at number 5 in the IBF and number 14 in the WBO. They're what, number 5 in the WBA? All right, yeah. So he's kind of like up there a little bit. Now, hey, maybe. Well, I don't know if it'll be by the end of this year though. Maybe you have like an outside chance that you could have Lucas Body facing the guy that was originally slated to face Ashton Silva on July of last year, before that initial date for Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson got rescheduled. You could see Lucas Body in the ring against Kid Austin Floyd Schofield. Yeah, you could probably see that. Hey, I say, how about that? You know what I mean? Say, hold on, Smack. Hold on, Smack says, what is it? I mean, Boots can say, well, Crawford ain't doing no favors, or didn't give him a shot, to fight for the undisputed welterweight title or whatever it is. Oh man, yeah, that would be wild though. That would be wild. But I don't know. We gonna hear more. Of course, we're gonna hear more from Jaron Boots Ennis here in the future. I don't know if it'd be the near future or whatever it is, but we'll hear from Jaron Boots Ennis on this, and him, having his little workout of sorts there with Canelo Alvarez. That's gonna be really interesting there on that front. Back on the thing there, as far as like the most valuable promotions card on Saturday. MVP fight night. There you had Jermaine Ortiz in there against Ambrorix Batista. That's some type of name there. Ambrorix. I'm. It might be Ambiorix, man. Yo, I know ain't no way that I've seen a name like that ever in life. Ambiorix Batista. Well, yo, yeah, that's a little bit of a struggle to kind of go through here, reading that for the first time. But Jermaine Ortiz was there with a technical knockout victory in the third round. This was his third consecutive bout there at the Caribe Royale in Orlando. Okay. He's there in the super lightweight division. Of course, he's had his bouts against Vasily Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez in the past. He did mention there when he fought Yomar Alamo in his last bout that he would like a fight between the current WBA super lightweight champion, Gary Antoine Russell. Yeah, that ain't necessarily going on or happening or happening here anytime soon. We still have to see what's going to be up with Gary Antoine Russell. We don't know any updates, or at least I don't know any updates yet when it comes to the mandatory challenge thing for Gary Antoine Russell. He's supposed to have this bout with Andy Hirioka. Some people thought that it would have been part of a card that would have happened on August 16th. No. It had like the whole thing with the whole negotiations and then the thing with the purse bid, but looks like some type of deal is in place because I haven't seen any news from the World Boxing Association in reference to a purse bid with Gary Antoine Russell and Andy Hirioka. So either they have a fight, they're just trying to, get a date for it, or there's something worked out where Gary Antoine Russell could have a unification bout. Now, if it's a unification bout, looks like it wouldn't be against Richardson Hitchens, because it don't look like, at least right now, that Richardson Hitchens is currently interested in having a bout with Gary Antoine Russell. So, hey, I don't know, what's going to happen or what's going to go down in reference to that for the WBA. But yeah, you got Jermaine Ortiz, as I mentioned there, getting that win. And I have to see like where he's at. Like he's currently at number 11 in the WBA and number 8 in the IBF. Number 10 in the WBO, but he's already faced, Teofimo Lopez, so that ain't really, much of nothing. And he's also number 11 in the WBC. So he's out there, floating around there in the rankings at 140 pounds. But as far as like him getting in position to fight for a world title at this particular juncture, yeah, I ain't necessarily saying that. But also, real quick shout out to those fighters that representing Tampa Bay that were there on their MVP card on Saturday, as you had Jasmine Ortega that defeated Lynn Sandstrom by TKO there within that fight card. And then also you had Ariel Perez getting a unanimous decision victory over Chris Avila there. So, hey, you had two fighters there representing Tampa, Florida on that card on Saturday, and they were able to get some good wins there too. So, shout out to them on that front. All right. So, pretty good card overall. Of course you had the majority draw between Yerkio Rivera and Angelino Cordova there, and Cordova had two points taken away. Basically, one was for a knockdown, and then another was for rabbit punching. Right, but with that being said, as I mentioned, it was a majority draw. Right, so you had two scores of 113, 113, and one score of 115 to 111 in favor of Angelino Cordova. So if you didn't have the knockdown, or if you didn't have the point for rabbit punching, it would have been a unanimous decision victory for Angelino Cordova. So Yanquio Rivera, I mean, I know that he's there that had been getting up in the ranks there within that particular division, kind of quickly there. Only had this was his eighth pro fight there in the flyweight division, just his eighth pro fight, and he was already getting in the mix there, man. But hey, he looked like he was getting outpointed, and hey, if it wasn't for those 2 points, he would have had his first loss. It would have been Angelino Cordova with the win on that front. So I don't know. They might revisit this fight. We'll see. We'll see if they revisit that fight. All right. So that kind of like covered the whole thing there for that fight card on Saturday. What else we had? You had Nat No Love Dove also with a stoppage win, and Jocelyn Camarillo there with the win as well on that fight card. That's a good amount of fights on Saturday, and they had of course fights on Friday too with the with their prospects or whatever it is, right? So 2 days of fights at or in Orlando there for Most Valuable Promotions. So definitely a number of things there for what they had. So what is it? Most Valuable Prospects there on Friday, right? And you had this thing here on Saturday, so a lot of action there for one particular city, man. That's something there, you know what I mean? So shout out to Most Valuable Promotions for having this fight card. You also had like what was it? Knockout highlight, knockout win there also. So a number of things here, but I definitely had to, catch up on a number of other fights that happened over the course of the weekend. You did also have a fight card that was in San Antonio, Texas, right? That featured Justin Baldo there, as they call him, the $1 Million Man, right? And he got a decision victory in that fight card as well. So shout out to, of course, Coach Ronnie Shields there in the corner for Justin Baldo, right? Where he had the decision win over Saeed Chino in that fight card. But also you had like Justin Figueroa on there. You had Javier Rodriguez against Brandon Cruz. A number of other fights there that was at the Techport Arena in San Antonio, Texas. There, that is actually on YouTube. So you can actually what is this? 210 Boxing, I think, has the full fight card there on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch all of those fights that were at the Techport Arena in San Antonio, right? So you do have that. As far as like next week is concerned, I have to, I'm not really seeing anything that kind of like stands out for boxing. I'm more looking towards what's going to happen on September 5th. Pro Box here in the Washington D.C. area. Of course, many of y'all know I'm based in the Washington D.C. area, right? So we're gonna have Pro Box there. Of course, No Excuse Promotions has their fight card there and at the Care First Arena in Washington D.C. Right, and you're gonna have Jordan White in there, and he's going to be in the ring, and he's going climbing up the ranks in that particular division. So you're going to have a number of the fighters within the Washington D.C. area featured on this card. You're going to have a couple of guys there from No Excuse Promotions or No Excuse Boxing. You're going to have a couple of fighters there from Hillcrest Boxing Gym. You're going to have what is it? You're also going to have, fighters from Headbangers Gym. Derek Scooter Davis is on there. As I mentioned there with No Excuse, you're going to have Jordan Roach, of course, the brother of Lamont Roach Jr. You're going to have Ben Johnson in their undefeated welterweight prospect there, right? You're going to have, a number of fighters there from Hillcrest Boxing Gym. Frankie Scarborough Jr. is going to be in there. You're going to have Irvin Fuller III on there. We're going to have Trayvon Marshall on the card as well. Andrew Council's, pupil. So, man, look at that. Man, struggling with that. How could I be struggling with a 5-letter word like pupil? Come on, man. What are we doing here? All right. So, but you're going to see a number of those fighters that's going to be on that fight card from the Washington, D.C. area. Okay. So that's one thing to kind of like look for. You're going to also have, on September 4th, in the super middleweight division, Osleys Iglesias versus Vladimir Shishkin. That's going to be in Montreal. I'm going to see here. I might have a article of sorts up on the boxingsource.net in reference to Osleys Iglesias. He is one of those highly ranked contenders in the super middleweight division. They're from Eye of the Tiger Promotions. So, and then Vladimir Shishkin, of course, is there with Salida Promotions as well. So you do have that, man. So that is kind of like the upcoming schedule here within the following week, not necessarily this week coming up. You have, wait a minute, there's actually a fight card in Manchester, England that's on the Zone pay-per-view. I'm looking at this thing here right now with the fight schedule. There is Ty Mitchell versus Sean Hemphill in the super middleweight division, and that's on the Zone pay-per-view. This guy be like some other type of event or whatever it is, because I don't know why it would be on the boxing schedule and it's on the Zone pay-per-view. Come on, what are we doing here, man? You know what I mean? I don't understand it. All right. But that's like kind of like the upcoming schedule here before we have what's the September 13th fight card over in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. Now, of course, you have like the four or so fights that are preceding Canelo versus Crawford, but they also have like a number of fights that are going to be before all of that. They're on the Netflix thing, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to like properly break that down, but I might like post a full schedule of sorts or a full slate of fights there on the social media or pretty much on X or something like that when it comes to September 13th. But that's mainly what I have here for this edition of the Boxing Source podcast. Big thanks for everyone that's been able to listen live, whether you're on Rumble or on YouTube or whether it's Twitch. I'm on Twitch also. You know what I mean? So big thanks for everyone that's listening live. You could share this stream. Now I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'm gonna put this on wax. I'm gonna have to figure out how I could get these particular podcasts in an audio form in a quicker fashion. I'm gonna have to do it or get it from Rumble or something, download it from Rumble, because the whole thing with YouTube, trying to get it from there and then convert it to audio form. Sorry, YouTube, you take it too long with all that. So we'll see how we could figure all of that out here a little bit later on down the line. But once again, big ups for everyone that's been able to listen live here through video form and also in audio form there through Spotify, iHeart, Amazon Podcasts, or whatever it is. And until next time, I'll catch y'all later. Peace out.